Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we have a special compilation for you of malicious compliance stories. This episode is meant for you to put on while you're working or driving or doing whatever you want to do. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. If you have a story you'd like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by email at karmastoriespod@gmail.com. If you enjoy true crime stories, be sure to check out our new podcast, Karma Crime, where we've released our 4th episode this morning. Over there, we're covering some of the lesser known true crime stories, and especially ones that have really interesting twists. Check it out for yourself, search for Karma Crime on any major podcasting platform. Alright, on to our Malicious Compliance compilation. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from AWAS. No one leaves until 5 p.m., but no overtime? Bet. Several years ago, I worked for an aerospace manufacturing company as a setup operator. You already know this won't end well. Meaning my job was to arrive before shift start, usually 3 or 4 hours early, make sure all the 5-axis mills were calibrated, the ATC automatic tool changer magazines were all loaded correctly, and the tooling was in good condition, nothing dulled or broken. If there was damaged tooling, part of the process was removing the carrier, replacing the cutter, and resetting the cutter height with a gauge, making it so that the tip of every cutter is in the exact same position for that particular holder every time. After being there for several years, the company eventually gets acquired and new management comes in. I'm there from 3 or 4 in the morning until 1 or 2 p.m., sometimes earlier if a new job gets added to the floor. Schedule works fine for me, I get to beat traffic both ways, and the pay is a bit higher due to the differential. After a few weeks, it gets noticed that I constantly leave early and always run over on hours, so they implement a new policy. Work starts at 9 a.m. and runs until 5. You have to be on the floor ready to go when the clock hits 9. I try to explain to my new boss exactly why I leave early, but he's more concerned about numbers and cash flow than what I actually do there. So fine, you want 9 to 5? I'll work 9 to 5. Instead of punching in at 4, I chill in my car till 8:45 and roll into the building, wait till exactly 9 and punch, then head to the floor. Roll up to the first CNC machine on the line and hit the E-stop, which shuts the machine down instantly. Tell the operator this hasn't been set up yet and they need to wait till it's ready. Head down the line and punch every one I pass, telling them the same thing. Not ready, go wait. I start at the end of the line with my platen and gauges and start calibrating the entire magazine, verifying everything in there is in spec and ready to be used. Get the magazine done and home the probe so the machine knows where it is in 3D space, and move to the next. That was about 40 minutes since I took my time. Meanwhile, the rest of the line is dead in the water. Nobody can do any work until their deck passes calibration and is certified to use. I'm partway through the second unit when I have my new manager breathing down my neck. Why is nothing running? What's going on? Etc, etc, etc. I sit back on my haunches and calmly explain to him, this is my job, the one that until today I used to come in hours early to do as to not mess with the production schedule. I need to get this done. Should be ready to start the line in another 5 or 6 hours, boss. I'm told to unlock and get the line moving. No can do. None of these machines are checked and I'm not signing off on the certification until I'm done. Anything not certified is an instant quality control reject. Choose run the line and reject $1 million in parts, or let me finish and lose $1 million in production time, and I go back to my old schedule tomorrow. The plant got a day paid to do nothing. I got the new boss off my back, and he got reamed all to heck for losing a day's production. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Furries, I think. It says, morale for any managers out there, question why the team does things the way they do, but don't just come in to alter everything. This is typical of so many malicious compliance stories. New management comes in, doesn't know how anything works, they try to do things their way without paying attention to what is actually working, and everything goes to hell. I stick to what I've said in other videos. Every new manager, every new executive should have to spend time doing the jobs that they are managing. That way, they'll actually know what's going on. Even if it's only a week or 2 weeks, they'll still have a much better understanding of how things need to be managed. This story comes to us from Possible Extro X879. 40 feet exactly? Yes ma'am, it'll be my pleasure. As of the beginning of this year, I work in pest control, and it has been quite a pleasant experience, all things considered. I get to meet some cool people, hear old folks' wisdom, and meet lots and lots of doggos and cats. The downside? The rich snobs and the Karens. I am not a very confrontational person, and will always try to find a middle ground where both sides are happy. However, when I am tired or just don't give a crap, I can be a little petty. One such occasion happened around the end of July or August. When me and my coworkers, got to a service home, we do service the yards, unlike some other companies that will just do interior and foundation of the home. However, since some yards are very large, we only go out to 40 feet and spot treat the remainder of the yard. 99% of people are fine with that. This lady, who is the star of this event, was fine with the 40 feet. I serviced the interior of her home first, and noticed that she was following me around and nitpicking my work. This isn't uncommon, but she was being extra rude, and it was the end of the day, so my patience was nearly gone. When I moved to the outside and began with the yard, she immediately started yelling at me saying, "That's not 40 feet. Our sprayers on a full charge, which mine was, will shoot roughly 25 feet. So I went 25 feet out and was doing a slow walk to cover the 40 feet. I tried to explain this to her, but she yelled, "You said 40 feet, so it has to be 40 feet exactly." 40 feet exactly? My pleasure. Without another word, I went to my truck, grabbed my toolbox, and got out my tape measure and measured out 40 feet. I then did another test spray, and wouldn't you know it, I was spraying 50 feet. I turned to her and said, "I apologize, ma'am. I was overspraying your yard. Let me fix that for you." She returned inside without another word, and I finished up and left. If she did report me, my boss didn't say anything. The one nice thing about her home, though, was she had a cute dog. In the comment section for this one, another user posted a similar story. It's from a user called PebblesV, and it says, "I have a story just like this. I used to be a cashier at Sprouts. If you're not familiar, their bulk section is very popular, but rarely used correctly. You're supposed to scoop your item into a bag, then write the PLU on a twist tie tag for your cashier to type in. Oftentimes, people would not have any number at all, purposely write an incorrect number. Once had a guy try to pass off a 3-pound bag of pine nuts as peanuts, or accidentally write an incorrect number. In the case of the latter, if I knew the actual item was more expensive than the item I rang it up as, I would let it slide and just let them have their bag for the cheaper price. Well, one day this lady came in and was carefully watching the monitor. She had a huge bag of raw almonds from the bulk section, and she was kind enough to write the PLU down for me. But it came up as some kind of candy that was significantly cheaper than the almonds. I noticed, but kept it moving. She also noticed, but couldn't help herself. And so in the snottiest, most condescending way, she stops me and is like, I didn't get any candy." So I stopped ringing her in, and in the most pleasant voice I said, "Oh, sure, let me fix that for you." Voided off the candy, and rang her massive bag of almonds in properly, and then continued ringing out her order. She continued to stare at the monitor, and when she realized her attitude cost her about $20 worth of nuts instead of $5 worth of candy, she looked down and quietly said, "I guess I should learn to keep my mouth shut." I just finished up and then wished her a good day. By all means, check the screen to make sure you're being rung up properly. Absolutely. If there is a mistake, definitely say something. I never begrudged anyone who did that. But you don't need to cop an attitude with me about it. especially when it was your mistake in the first place, and I do begrudge that. Alright, a message to all of the Karens out there: if you complain, sometimes you're gonna get exactly what you ask for, even if it isn't exactly what you want. Sometimes it's just better to keep your mouth shut, but if you're a Karen, I know that doesn't apply to you, because you don't know how to keep your mouth shut. This story comes to us from Kooky Tradition 5974. No fashion boots allowed. A few years back when I was in high school, I lived in a small country town as a very flamboyant, obviously queer teenage boy, without even needing to say anything. Needless to say, I was definitely the most popular kid in school, and everyone was totally supportive. Even the staff at the school wasn't the biggest fan of me, unfortunately, even though I was a not-so-straight-A student who never caused any trouble. Luckily, being raised on a very literal farm, my family was and continues to be really supportive. They knew how interested I am in fashion, and my parents surprised me on my birthday with this pair of heeled Doc Marten Chelsea boots I had been saving up for. Obviously, I was ecstatic and wore them constantly, both in and out of school for about a week, before I was dress-coded for them. Unfortunately, this was not my first time being dress-coded because of my tendency to wear more feminine clothing. So I had developed the habit of carrying the dress code pamphlet on me in my bag to prove my innocence, because I was really never breaking any rules. They just happened to not like what I was wearing. I pointed out that there was nothing about boots or heels, and my teacher just sort of scoffed at me and told me to go to the front office. Apparently they had updated it, and if I had read the newsletter that morning, I would have known that. I went up to the front office, and true to what she had said, they had added a rule to the effect of work boots were allowed, but no fashion boots. Unfortunately, it was very obviously targeted because no one, male or female, was wearing anything like that except for me. My parents knew that too. When I got home and told them about it, they were furious for me. My dad took me out the very next day after school to a boot store and quite literally bought me a $300 pair of women's black work boots that were complete with even some sparkly rhinestones on them. Quite frankly, these boots made me look more queer than the first pair ever did, and I loved them. I wore these proudly with a black sparkly hat I already owned to school the next day, and didn't even make it to second period before I was called to the front office for violating dress code. The assistant principal told me these were obviously violating dress code, and I insisted that these were work boots, and practically every other kid wore cowboy boots to school every single day, so there couldn't possibly be a problem with mine. She wouldn't budge, and neither would I, so my parents were called, and it was escalated to the principal. Luckily, we expected this and were prepared. My dad showed up in all of his fresh off the farm dirt-covered glory to my principal's office. The conversation went to the effect of her sitting there telling my father, "Those are very obviously for fashion and are violating dress code," and my father would respond something to the effect of, "How do you know what my kid chooses to wear to work in? Since when is wearing boots breaking dress code? Look at everyone else." And this went back and forth for, quite frankly, an embarrassing amount of time. But by the end, I was allowed to wear my boots. Much to the annoyance of my old high school staff, I wore those darn black sparkly boots practically every day for the rest of my high school experience. And then, 3 years later, when I was long gone in college, my little sister, an open and proud lesbian by the way, entered high school. We just happened to have the same shoe size, and I didn't mind loaning her the boots. She is a junior now and continuing my legacy of terrorizing the homophobic teachers and staff by wearing those same shoes to school to this day, which held up amazing by the way. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Van Hoother. It says, "Dress codes not related to actual safety are idiotic. Simply a way for intolerant idiots on the school board to lord it over everyone else. Good on you for fighting back." Alright OP, the fact that they were updating their dress code to obviously target you in particular is absolute bullshit. Pardon my language, but this really gets me pissed off. I sincerely hope that when your sister is done with those boots, that she passes them on to somebody else who will proudly wear them to that school for many more years to come. And if they need to be fixed, well, get them fixed and keep on wearing them, because that legacy needs to continue. This story comes to us from Minurva JB. You want me to escalate a claim? Sure. I used to work on the retentions department of an ISP back in the day. While many people called genuinely wanting to cancel their phone service, just as many knew that retentions was more than that. The ISP, let's call them Red Phone, had two different departments. I worked on Retentions 1, where we did a lot of fixing bills and offering small discounts and slightly cheaper phones to customers who said they wanted to leave. Retentions 2 was for customers who were in the process of porting their numbers, and the worst thing they offered was a 50% discount for a couple of years with a decent phone for free. This happened roughly 10, maybe 12 years ago when roaming was straight up highway robbery. Let me introduce you to the executive. I got the call. I did my little introductory spiel, and I immediately discovered this guy was the most entitled POS I'd ever had the displeasure to speak to. He said he was a very important executive who traveled a lot for work, but the bill he got was ridiculous, and I had to solve it or he was going to cancel his service. I muted him so he heard nothing, but I could still hear what he said, and while I checked his account, I could hear him gloat to his girlfriend that he's getting the bill credited because he knows how to play the system. And he was a butthole, but he wasn't wrong. This guy was a pro at playing Red Phone. He had the highest phone plan the company offered, which was around 90 euros at the time for one line, but paid 30 euros per month because he had discounts from both departments stacked on top of each other. His plan allowed him to get what at the time was a super expensive phone for basically nothing at Retentions 2. He'd gotten the super shiny customer status and the super shiny customer service line, which usually meant a customer was averaging a 300 euro monthly bill, despite his 30 euro bill, because he complained about how the delocalized customer service sucked. He was also not wrong about his bill being ridiculous. He'd visited several European countries, got a 600 euro bill, called customer service, and said he had not known that roaming was so expensive. No one had warned him when he told us he was traveling overseas. The company had a policy that the first time a customer complained about something, we could refund them, particularly if the complaint was that the customer had not been informed about extra charges. So the rep informed him about roaming costs and refunded him all of the roaming charges, leaving the bill at 30 euro. Second month comes around, he kept using the phone overseas, got a 1500 euro bill. He calls customer service. They tell him they can't refund him again. He says he wants to cancel his account then and gets transferred to me. He was demanding that we credited his roaming charges again because if we can do it once, we can do it again. And also because roaming prices were abusive. He did have a point there. I told him I couldn't do that, so he wanted me to open a claim and escalate it. I refused again because there was no one to escalate to. He wasn't going to get that credited. He insisted he wasn't hanging up until I escalated the issue because he wasn't informed. And if I kept the call going for much longer, he was going to charge the company for his time because he was a busy man. At this point, I'd been working there long enough that if you were nice or even normal, I would try my darndest to help you. But if you were a dick, sorry, can't do, get lost. Customer refuses to hang up, I can hang up. This guy though, he'd gone past being a dick into total sea waffle, and I was pissed off. I couldn't be a dick back, but he'd been effing around, and I could make sure he found out. So I told him that, okay, since he was so insistent, I would open a claim to refund him the 1500 euro bill, and muted him while I opened the claim. The butthole was again gloating at his girlfriend about how clever he was because he was going to get his bill refunded too. Meanwhile, I was copy-pasting the notes from the previous month's claim where the rep had written, I've informed the customer of roaming charges in all the countries he told me he could be visiting, a list of European countries. Also stacking discounts, very much not a thing. He had to spam the Retention 1 call centers with calls, until he got a newbie lost enough to apply another discount over his retentions 2 discount. And he had not read the terms and conditions of the accounts, but I had. Trying to defraud the company was grounds for service termination. I got the claim number, flagged down my supervisor, and told her to please send it to headquarters in the daily report so fraud could examine the account. I told the guy that the claim had been opened, but also that since it was obvious he was trying to abuse the company's policies, the claim had been flagged to be reviewed by fraud, and it was likely his account would be terminated. He went from entitled to worried in 2 seconds, and asked me to close the claim. Sorry dude, can't do. You wanted a claim open? Now it's open. Yes, the customer was fired. We're gonna jump into the comments of this one for another very similar story. This one's from a user called Frigoff and it says, 20 plus years ago, I worked at a call center in Canada dealing with a US cellular company, and roaming was a massive problem. There were areas along the Gulf Coast where you could pick up a tower that was out in the Gulf, but the charges on it were basically $3.25 a minute. Well, we had many people upset over that. And like in OP's tale, we would credit them once and teach them to look for the word roam on the top of their phone. But if it happened again, they were responsible for the charges. Sometimes we'd get people who had incurred charges for just a few minutes the second time, and if it was under $25, we would generally do it as we could see they were making an effort to avoid the charges. My absolute favorite of the charged roaming and shouldn't have been customers was a woman who wanted to know why she had charges when her plan included the whole US. When I checked her bill, yep, the whole US is covered. However, the 3 Canadian provinces she spent time in weren't covered. So when I explained this to her, she told me that Canada was one of the 50 states. I was dumbfounded by this, so I explained that it wasn't, that Canada is a different country. She called me stupid. I explained that I was in Canada at that very moment, and she demanded a supervisor, as when she was educated, Canada was one of the states, and I was obviously not fit for my position. She went from me to my supervisor, to their supervisor, to the project director, to the site director, and still didn't believe any of us that Canada wasn't a state. We refused to credit the charges for her, $900+, and when she screamed she would just cancel the service, we informed her she would still be responsible for the charges and would have an early termination fee of $200 per line. She had 5. She cursed and swore so much that one of the supervisors that was listening to the call, not for coaching but entertainment at the scenario, came over and just disconnected the call. All of us documented the account, site director approved immediate cancellation of her lines as she requested, and due to her verbal abuse of staff. I feel sorry for whoever got her when she called back in about 5 minutes, but I checked that account for a few months, she never got a credit or paid it. It got sent to collections for total charges over $3,500. And when she called us back about it, we refused to discuss with her and told her she needed to call the collection agency. I got one of those calls, and I'm sure she could hear the crap-eating grin on my face during the whole call. I love stories like this where people think they're going to get whatever they want from a company, but they're belligerent about it and it just doesn't go their way. In fact, they do get a promotion, but they're promoted to the competitor's problem. I've worked in about 8 different call centers over the years, don't judge me, and the rules are usually that they let the customers walk all over the agents on the phone, and the customers pretty much get whatever they want. So in this case, being able to tell the customer to pound sand, that is absolutely wonderful to me. This story comes to us from RunnerDan. You work 8 hours a day and that's it. I was a developer for a large financial services company, and because we lacked many tools, I was usually tasked with building various tools, scripts, reports, etc. to help automate the environment, and really just worked around the inadequacies of our off-the-shelf tools. At my peak, I probably had around 300 apps and/or scripts in production. Due to the number of asks from leadership and to keep the lights on, I usually booked anywhere from 4 to 10 hours of overtime per week. After about a year, I got a new boss who decided she would ensure that I take no overtime for any reason. She proclaimed that I would only be allowed to work 8 hours per day and not a moment more. No exceptions. I wasn't a full-time employee, so I didn't have any grounds to push back. I usually started at 8, so with my 30-minute lunch, that meant my new hours were 8 to 4:30. Flash forward to later that same week, an upstream system changed their data feed and it corrupted one of our downstream systems. Stuff like this happened often enough that I had translation tools built to resolve any of those feed-related issues, but even then, I still had to spend a few minutes figuring out what changed in order to adjust my own code. Anyway, as the operations have come to a halt, my boss and her boss are looking over my shoulder as I'm diagnosing the feed problem, which I found pretty quickly. The clock strikes 4:30 and I lock my computer, stand up from my desk and say, well, it's 4:30, that's my 8 hours, I'll see you tomorrow, and walk out. The look of confusion, rage, and exasperation was just chef's kiss. At this point, all of our overnight backups have stopped and will not run until I resolve things. This means a global financial institution no longer has any data backups being made for that entire night and will be completely screwed if, well, anything happens. Flash forward to the next morning as I walk to my desk at 7:56 a.m. as I made sure to never be in a situation where I could be called out as coming in late. My boss's boss is waiting for me. He directs me into his office and very calmly says, moving forward, I'll manage your timesheet and you can take as many hours as you need. I left that job about 4 to 5 months later, and the entire building was laid off about 2 months after that. Only 2 of about 200 people weren't laid off, and one of those people was the guy I hired to backfill me as someone had to keep all the code running. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called the Old Man 1313. It says, I love the managers that think there's nothing more important in life than eliminating overtime. They are always good for entertainment. I think OP missed a major opportunity here because it was plainly obvious to upper management how important OP was and they were allowed to keep working overtime. I think it was time for OP to negotiate their salary at that point, or at least negotiate their overtime rate, because if I'm that important that you're going to let me work overtime again, well, better make it worth my while. This story comes to us from Weep Ninny Bong. Boss doesn't understand Outlook. Happened over a decade ago before workplace chats were a regular thing. My boss at the time was an old timer. I'm pretty sure he was past his retirement age. No grudge against that. He was very good at most aspects of his job, just set in his older ways. Often, I would have to call a meeting with our colleagues in Japan, with him included. For various reasons, he would get upset if I scheduled these without talking to him first about his schedule, even though his calendar showed him as free. He insisted that I have to check in directly with him in his office. The problem is, he wasn't always there. So what I would do was just send him an Outlook meeting invite to just him and him alone for the time I proposed to have this meeting. It was convenient because I was already looking at his availability in Outlook. He could accept if he works, and then I could update the meeting with everyone else needed. He sees this and hollers at me to go to his office. He's a pretty big, loud dude, so everyone in my vicinity hears. He proceeds to ream me out for not doing what he asked. I'm sure he didn't understand that he was the only one on the invite, and he wasn't appearing to decline the meeting in front of anyone. I tried to explain, but then proceeds to say under no circumstances should I book a meeting with him without chatting with him in person. Sure enough, a day or two later, a very important meeting request comes through for that afternoon with some higher-ups, and he's not around for me to talk to as it was later in the day. My manager's number 2, who heard the minor fiasco above, takes me aside and says, I know what he just yelled at you about, but I think you should just book that meeting. He didn't even need to be there, it was just proper for him to attend. Needless to say, I didn't, quoting what Bossman said, and that meeting never happened that day. I vaguely remember him losing a few points for not being able to have this meeting, but nothing nuclear. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Emax4. It says, "You did the right thing. Boss should have understood at his age and position that actions have consequences. I'd leave him brochures for night classes at the local community college regarding Microsoft Office training." Yeah, I don't think I agree with that commenter because, they're just going to take a look at those brochures and go, "Oh, I'm too important and I don't have time for that." And they're going to end up in the garbage or recycle. Sometimes you just can't teach an old dog new tricks, and this sounds like the kind of guy that would print out emails just to have a physical copy. This story comes to us from Lazy Bystander. Higher-ups told me to look elsewhere. So I am a civil engineer that has done my engineering degree specializing in structural engineering. On top of that, I did a specializing year in complex studies and design in a renowned school in my country after my engineering degree. Don't know if that could give you an idea of my competencies, but I was second and third respectively on the rankings for both these schools for a promotion of 120 people. As a consequence, you could say I am heavily specialized. Cue the end of my studies. I signed a contract for the job I wanted before even finishing my studies. I wasn't rushed. Pretty much interviewed for 5 jobs with 7 CVs sent and 4 propositions. The team I joined was 6 engineers, including me, specializing in existing structures. Think if a bridge or dam has a crack, they call us to come on site and run calculations to see if everything is fine or not. Fast forward a year, I integrated quite well, grew in competence and maturity. After the second, I have gone from the guy asking questions to the guy they came to when people needed answers. All was well. I got raises every year and bonuses with compliments, all the good stuff. Stuff began to go bad after the 3rd year. At the 3rd year, I was more or less the go-to guy for complex projects and when people didn't find answers. As such, I asked to move forward from project manager to a more back position we call technical referent. Basically, you keep producing as usual, but some of your time is dedicated to standard compliance for the team and answering deeper subjects that are passed throughout the year. It is not something that existed in this firm, but exists in a lot of firms here. I proposed this because at the time the team had grown to 12 people. Thanks to my participation in more complex projects, we even had grown our sales by 30% in 3 years. We had raised more people as project managers. As a consequence, with basically 2 people taking the part I couldn't do when becoming a referent, it became a new possibility. Even my chief and the chief of my chief told me and wrote in my yearly review that a lot of the projects we had at the time were because I was here. Anyways, to become a technical referent, I told them I would need to get some formations to complete my technical knowledge, for which I proposed the subjects myself, and even got pricing and contacts for institutions. They agreed both in oral and writing, but saying it might take some time, but they're interested in creating this position in the firm. You can begin to imagine where this is going. At the 4th year, becoming more and more essential to the team, I was teaching and testing newcomers. Everyone came to ask me questions instead of going to the chief. Even the chief came to me. He even told me he didn't even comprehend the technical meaning of some of the technical reports and calculations I made. Basically, I became the go-to guy when blocked or all is lost. Seeing nothing happening regarding the formations I asked for and the position, I asked to see someone from HR to discuss my career plan. Well, the HR interview was a dumpster fire. They got my name wrong, never heard of me, didn't get my file, nothing. So the discussion was rather void and short. To give you an idea, the firm is quite big here for our branch of the trade, 500 people with 6 HR people at the time for all of us. Funnily, the HR I saw was the one who recruited me. Came the yearly interview after with my chief, I pretty much said I was beginning to have some doubt about their will to make me evolve. They did give me a raise and a bonus and told me they would do everything necessary to make me evolve as I asked. Now at my 5th year, 3 people left, 2 for geographical reasons to reunite with their family, and 1 because they realized They technically couldn't follow the team and the projects we worked on. Nothing happened for me. I was more or less one of the 2 pillars of our team, but no formations, no evolution, no nothing. Even had to fight to get a specialized computer for calculations. Try to run a complex FEM model on a 5-year-old i5 with 8 gigs of RAM all day long and you will feel my pain. Anyway, I asked to see my chief. I basically told him it's been 2 years, nothing has been done, please do something, anything. After this, they asked me for a meeting with the chief of my chief, and a chief from another division. First thing in the meeting, the chief of my chief says, "So I didn't read your file and I'm not aware of what is asked. Please explain again." This guy manages 50 people. Yes, 50. Fine, I explained again. After explaining, I was more or less crushed by 2 of them for 1 hour while my chief said nothing. Basically, I didn't make any effort. It is my job to answer everyone. I was asking for too much and stuff like that. To be true, at the 10th minute, I shut my brain off. And at the end, I pretty much told them, if nothing is done, I would begin to look elsewhere, and many of the team which are looking at this situation might follow. They answered that I should look elsewhere if not satisfied, but they will see to meet my demands, which is quite a contradiction. Cue now 4 months later, where I was more or less treated as if I was sick, and I would transmit it to them by the hierarchy. I was told on multiple times, the grass is not greener elsewhere, you might not find something better, but you might still want to look, and all the nice things you can imagine to keep someone. I get along with everyone in the team. All, except my chief who was indifferent, were quite irritated with what was happening for me. To note, most of them were taught by me at this point, with their skills inherited from me too. Well, being fed up with my hierarchy, I did begin searching, thinking nothing would move. Indeed, nothing moved. I sent 5 CVs, interviewed for 3, and got 2 propositions, and accepted 1. Before going, I told them that even if grass is not always greener elsewhere, you won't keep someone by threatening them, and that people might follow what I have done if they're not able to recognize their talents. I got a nice job now, more laid back, less hours, 10% raise, more advantages, including a car paid by the firm, national referent for my post, and more. Now, the fallout. 2 people followed me in resigning 3 and 6 months later because they lost trust in the firm with what happened to me. From the 6 people left, 3 told me that they would leave because of what happened. From what they said to me, the atmosphere is dead now. They don't have anyone to turn to for technical questions. No fun discussions at the job, no more technical discussions, pretty much a skeleton crew waiting to find better. To give you an idea, those guys are good. Tried to recruit 2 of them myself, but was refused because it's too far from their family. Understandable. I do try to send them job offerings I hear from and recommend them. When they are gone, the person with the most experience in the division, except the chief, would have 10 months experience. The medium experience time would be 5 months. They lost big contracts I carried. Some clients called me personally to ask what happened and said they will give them the benefit of the doubt, but they told me they didn't trust my chief because he screwed them over in the past. I went back some time ago to say hi. I was told the sales have gone back to the level 5 years ago before I was in the firm, a decrease of 35% at the time in the span of 9 months with 3 resignations. Even my now past chief told me they now don't even try to answer projects involving calculations that seem a bit hard because they don't have the competencies with me gone. Now the future for the division seems hazy because they don't know where to stand because of the lack of competencies, complex projects, calculations, etc. This happened quite some time ago now, but happy to get this off my chest. For newly hired and first job people, please begin to recognize your worth as soon as you can. It will help you so much to evolve and know when you are being screwed. Thanks for reading. Cheers. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Questor Tapes. It says, "One bit of advice. In 2 cases you mentioned that your file was not read. For anyone reading this, it's a good idea to bring your own copies of all possibly relevant documentation that shows your worth. In this particular case, it's quite possible it would have made no difference, but in other circumstances, where management is more benignly incompetent, it can have value. Okay, first of all, if you're walking into a meeting with your boss's boss, and they say, "I haven't read your file and don't know what's going on," I think at that point you can stand up, look them in the eyes and say, "Okay, so you're not prepared. Would you like to reschedule this so you can do your due diligence and know actually what you're supposed to be talking about?" Like, come on, this guy manages what, 50 people, OP said? You should know who the pillars are of your team if you only have 50 people. And let's quickly revisit the comment of the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. It may not be, but over there, I'm not dodging dog crap like I am over here. This story comes to us from Everybody's Therapist. Let your best employee go? I'll take it all down with me. This happened a couple of years ago, but I was thinking about it recently. I worked for a company doing their media design, graphic design, photography, live event AV, video editing, etc. This company held big events, and over my years at the company, I was given more and more unrelated responsibilities until I was doing the jobs of at least 4 people. They also never helped pay for any materials, so all of the necessary media equipment was paid for out of pocket. All of them had my name on them to make sure that it wouldn't get lost if I lent it out. Over the years, I had accumulated a pretty impressive supply through secondhand purchases and watching for deals. By the time I hit my 5th year there, I had thousands of dollars in high-end equipment that was used for almost every part of the organization's promotion and event production. I think you can see where this is going. One day, I was brought into my boss's office and told that they would be downsizing and had found someone fresh out of college with no real life experience that will be taking over my job, as well as a few others. I was completely caught off guard. They then had one of the people from corporate follow me to my office to assist in cleaning out my stuff. He specifically said, "Take everything that is yours, you won't be coming back." So that's what I did. They clearly expected the usual paper box full of some photos and a plant, but instead, I had them hauling crate after crate of our media and event supplies to my car. I had a 2004 Ford Explorer at the time, and by the time I left, it was filled to the brim. With every box that we took out to my car, my boss began to get more and more panicked. At one time he said, "You can only take things that are yours," and through my sadness and anger, I was able to find it in me to kindly tell him that every single thing I was taking was mine, and that I kept all the receipts if he wanted proof. The final nail in the coffin was when I told him that I would need access to the arena's AV booth and the catwalk. I still remember the fear in his eyes. We went and I unplugged all of my cameras that I had been lending to my events team, all of which were clearly marked with my name. I felt like the Grinch, just walking around and taking all the random things in the building that had my name on them. Driving away, I was heartbroken that a company I had given 200% to in every way had picked someone younger and fresh out of college to replace me. But I won't lie, the smugness of watching their faces as I stripped the place bare was worth it. Looking back on it, that was the worst and most toxic job I've ever had. The company only lasted another year before they folded entirely, and I like to believe that I had a hand in that. And to think if they had just compensated me fairly and purchased the necessary things themselves, instead of forcing me to provide my team with things, they wouldn't have had to start from scratch. It's too bad that we don't hear what OP did after this because, let's be honest here, they left this place, but they have all of the necessary equipment to start their own business doing exactly what they were before. And oh my gosh, wouldn't you know, there's a big company that just lost all of their equipment that might need a contractor to come in and do the work for them. Oh, and OP, guess what? All of your equipment fits perfectly for what they need done. The only thing is, you now get to set your own rate. Okay though, on a serious note, don't buy a whole bunch of stuff for your workplace and put your name on it, because there's a good chance that workplace is going to try and claim that stuff anyway. And are you really able to go to battle against a giant corporation to say that all this stuff I used to do my job there was mine and didn't belong to the company? Good luck with that. This story comes to us from Bapiri. If you don't like it, you can just leave. I've been working with a home health agency for the better part of 9 months. I work 12-hour days with cases ranging from complex to simple. In that time, I've worked 11 unscheduled doubles and 42 additional 12-hour overtime shifts. I have used exactly 2 sick days, one for myself and one for my kid. I do not call out. I do not show up late, and I don't do the corner cutting they suggest. I take vacation time on my off days. I've saved them on 3 specific occasions from failing audits. I picked up so much because A, the money is nice, B, I legitimately care about the well-being of my patients, and C, they begged me. You see, the company I work for likes to take on new clients without having enough staff to cover that patient. Then, they freak out and offer bonuses for us to pick up. These are governmentally contracted jobs with big DOE bucks coming in. If they can't prove the patient is taken care of, they are fined heavily. Too many fines, and they're blackballed from taking new DOE clients at all. This company is so poorly run, it's a joke. They have 8 schedulers, but still send mass texts every single day asking us to pick up. These happen all hours of day and night. They often double book or randomly change schedules without informing clients or nurses. They also underpay for my area. Not much, but paying $4 less per hour is a big deal. They also won't respond to your questions, calls, or texts for days to weeks at a time. I've been looking around for a while and found a company that pays more, has good leadership, and they said they'd have me on the ground running closer to home if I just went through their hiring program. I agreed and have been an employee with them for about a month, just no hours worked yet. Back to my malicious compliance. I knew I'd be out of town for a couple of days and have 9 days worth of PTO banked. I decided to help them out and asked for 3 days off. I assumed that would give them enough time to fill my spot. I did this on September 13th. The days I requested are October 12th, 13th, and 14th. It's a mini vacation for my family since I worked all summer. Monday, I received a nasty email about the final day for PTO requests being September 10th. I let the manager know I was trying to help them out by giving them time to fill it. She shot back with how selfish of me it was to leave her short-handed. She rejected my PTO request. Tuesday, I showed up at the office to discuss this little frustration. I mentioned my exemplary work history and intention of making things easier for them. She slammed the table with her balled fist and said, "You will work these days. I don't care if you have a trip planned to Australia, you'll be there. If you don't like it, you can just leave." It was her nasty smirk that set me off. I stood up, took a mint, and said, "As you wish. I expect all my PTO to be on my next paycheck in accordance with our state's PTO laws. I hope you can fill the opening on such short notice." The look of horror on her face was more valuable than the PTO. In the past 24 hours, I've received 19 voicemails asking if I can come into work because they're short. Tonight is my first night with the new company. It ended up being $6 an hour more, 48 minutes each way closer to home, and I get paid 40 hours even though I worked 36. Be careful what you wish for, you may just get it. Alright, have we not learned yet that we don't stretch ourselves for any company where we don't have a financial stake? If you go out of your way to do more work for a company, you're gonna get nothing back in most situations. All they're gonna see is somebody who is exploitable and who will keep on doing all that extra work. I'd like to touch on one more thing here as well, because OP said that they were working 12-hour days, but sometimes taking extra time and scheduling additional days. Then they said when they went to the new job, their commute was reduced by 48 minutes each way. That means that their commute was likely an hour-ish to get to that job. So they were working a 12-hour day with 2 hours of commute time. I understand you've got to do what you've got to do to get the bills paid, but that really sucks. This story comes to us from Pool of Cheddar. Boss was reluctant to do anything about deadweight coworker because he wasn't making obvious mistakes. We decided to make it obvious. We had this coworker on our team. The best way to describe him is to use a Homer Simpson line, "Everyone says they have to work a lot harder when I'm around." Projects given to him usually were not completed correctly, not entirely completed, or not even worked on at all. He violated security protocols, gave out equipment to other departments, and would occasionally disappear for hours. He would always have someone else to blame for his problems, contractors, staff in other departments, but the last straw for the rest of us was when he tried to throw his own team under the bus. We all knew he was skating by because we'd fix his mistakes to keep everything else running. And admittedly, it's hard to get fired from a state job. But after blaming us and having to hear about it, that was the last straw. So the rest of us on the team stopped helping him, and we stopped fixing his mistakes. He wasn't making obvious mistakes before, now they were obvious. The mistakes were piling up, and fast. We would collaborate with him only down to the bare minimum. He had no reason to blame us if our contributions to a project were completed and his weren't. And then came the kiss of death. He took a week off. With him not around, everything that piled up started getting completed by the rest of us. New tasks were completed on top of that and on time. Even my boss could not ignore the simple fact that the place ran smoother without him around. After he returned, everything started piling back up again. So we came into work a couple weeks ago, and it was announced that he had left the organization. Not one person was surprised. The thing that amazes me about this whole thing is that nobody coordinated it. None of us hatched a plan. We all just individually decided that enough was enough. You wanted obvious? You got it. It's impressive how much it takes to get fired for some people. My last two jobs both featured a teammate who essentially collected a paycheck and did nothing in return. At least my manager here had the balls to do what was needed. It's also amazing that in the end, there's less work to do with him gone, because tasks don't need to be done twice anymore. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Real Ultimate Papo. It says, "Fighting no effort with no effort. Bold, but it's paid off. Nothing like shedding dead weight to make you feel lighter." Another commenter called La Flibust said, "If there's a fire, it's useless throwing yourself to the ground to roll on it and put it out. Management will do nothing because you made the fire unnoticeable. You'll have burned yourself, and the fire will just keep going indefinitely. Just let the fire be. Management will be bound to see the smoke and damage eventually, and assess it for the crisis it is. And then they'll do something definitive about it. Will your organization or its mission be harmed by this? Yeah, but what do you care? Better it than you." I've definitely been in situations like this where people just don't carry their own weight at work. And the best thing to do is just let them do it, because eventually the boss is going to notice and the trash is going to take itself out. These people's indifference and incompetence will usually lead to their destruction. It's only a matter of time. Never cover for somebody like this, unless you're sleeping with them. Then that's a different story. This story comes to us from Sigbback. "I do love following them company policies. I have learned so much from this subreddit, and now I'm putting it all to use. I hope this is the right subreddit for this. So it's my birthday month, and while some stores offer their Fidelity members and people with club cards certain items, like the garden store let me pick out a little potted plant, perfume store gave me a free little travel-sized perfume, etc., some stores only do a discount code, and only if you make a purchase, which is wild to me. I'm in France, and normally it's just a small free item, no obligation, no strings at all, just come into the store and pick it out. For example, I ordered some wooden advent calendars for my kiddo to make while on the upcoming school break, and after I place the order, suddenly I get a birthday €5 off my next purchase when I spend €20 email. No problem. I had set my delivery for pickup in store, so I just returned and rebought the items with the €5 gift. Perfect. Thanks Reddit for the idea, by the way. But the malicious part comes from the tax store. I get a gift card there and actually have had my eye on some things for my horse, so I went in. and saw that I have a 20% coupon on all items, but only starting next week. It's store-wide. So I see the items I had wanted in the color I want, and there's only one of each item left. I ask if they will restock or can order me some if they happen to sell out before the sale. This is common. They can order anything from their catalog, so it's not rude to ask. Cashier says no. Okay. I ask if they can put items aside or if I can call in advance to see if it's stocked. No. This is so weird to me. I'm thinking I have slighted this person because normally the sales representatives have no problem holding items for 24 hours. But she states company policy and says she won't do it. Okay, I can respect that. So I ask about their returns and how long I have to return an item and what conditions. 30 days? Super. I bought the items, and next week when my voucher becomes valid, I'll be able to return, then rebuy them. She actually smiled when she understood. We are both respecting company policy, and it's my perfect way to ensure the items are stocked. Plus, now she can legitimately order more for her location. Ah, compliance. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Beer Belly Be Gone. It says, sometimes they want you to maliciously comply because they legitimately don't have any other way to help you. OP responded to this one and said, oh, absolutely, and I can understand. I get the feeling company policy has been pushed here recently. Okay, this story was really weird to me. I'm in Canada, and I don't have a birthday month. I have a birthday on a certain day of a certain month, and that's when we celebrate it. But even though I have a birthday on a certain day of a certain month, I'm not expecting retail locations to give me anything for free. So I don't know if that's something from a specific country or specific area of the world, but that really hit me by surprise. It also made OP kinda sound a little entitled, but maybe that's just my opinion. So the compliance in this story was great. It was both from OP and the worker themselves, but I need you guys to comment if you're listening on YouTube and let me know if OP sounds entitled to you too. This story comes to us from KQH. Tell me to call the emergency doctor for a phone order instead of recharting? Okay. I'm a clinical nurse in physical rehabilitation in Australia. I will never forget a lot of our residents, junior doctors, for being brilliant. But one resident I will never forget because he was awful. One fateful Thursday, I overheard him complaining to the consultant and registrar. It's boring here, there's nothing to do. I know it's not the most high energy place to be, and it's definitely not for everyone, but I thought that was a little rude and snide to say the least. This same doctor, only a day or two later, was asked to rechart an as-needed pain order for a patient who was having a lot of pain for acute gout. We had already had to contact the emergency department medical registrar, we call them the EdMedReg for short, overnight the night before for a phone order for her pain relief, as there were no spaces left on her as-needed order and, at the time, we did not have a doctor on call overnight at the campus I work at. Instead of recharting the order, the resident, who, remember, was apparently so bored and had so little to do that he complained both to the registrar and the consultant about it, instead chose to write a sticky note telling the nurses to just call the EdMedReg for a phone order if she has pain overnight, and stuck it on top of the patient's previous as-needed pain relief order. It would have taken him less time to rewrite the order. Not to mention, as if the EdMedReg doesn't have enough work to do in the literal emergency department. Seeing that note as the night duty nurse on charge and remembering that snide little remark of his made my blood boil, but it was, of course, nighttime and long past the resident's knockoff time. So when the poor patient inevitably had pain overnight, I had no choice but to call. The EdMedReg just so happened to be the same doctor as the night before, and, rightfully, was a little confused and slightly annoyed we were calling for the same phone order 2 nights in a row, when surely the treating team should have written a new order during the day. He asked whether we had asked them to do so, and I told him about the sticky note and even read it to him. I remember a beat of silence on the other end of the phone before he said, "Right," before giving me the phone order. I thanked him, apologized for having to disturb him, and went to help my patient. When I came on the next night, lo and behold, the resident had written up a new as-needed order. In fact, we never saw a sticky note like that again, and as-needed orders were rewritten in a timely manner. I don't know if that doctor ever got spoken to about his smug little sticky note, but I like to think he got a good talking to. Just because my patients aren't in ICU or emergency department doesn't make them and their health unimportant. They're still in hospital and deserve proper inpatient health care. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Puzzleheaded Goal 8234. It says, "Oh, to be a fly on the wall for the conversation between the EdMedReg and the resident. I am very confident that it was had and didn't end well for the resident." OP responded and said, "Right," and then to hear the follow-on conversation he'd have with the consultant, a man very passionate about helping our patients achieve good outcomes. I don't imagine that one went much better. Another commenter down below called Sidekick said, "Oh, he got spoken to for sure. The fact that it was never an issue again shows just how forceful the talking to was." OP responded to this one and said, "I hope he went on to learn from it and become a better doctor. It was just bizarre he wrote a note instead of recharting it in the first place. It really would have taken less time to just rechart the pain relief." One more comment down below comes from Marcia Mallowfluff. It says, "My husband is a retired physician. He always said to treat your nurses well. They can make your life really difficult or much easier." Does it sound to anybody else like this doctor was just being incredibly lazy? They're complaining about not having enough work, but then when the work comes around, they just don't want to do it? It doesn't really make sense. Is this somebody that you want trying to fix your body? Let's think about that for a second. This reminds me of a saying that does really put things into perspective in a case like this. It's, what do you call the doctor that graduated lowest in their class? Well, you call them a doctor. This story comes to us from Vampire Wolf. HR doesn't like me. Way back in winter 2006-2007, a classmate got a promotion at work, so a dozen or so of us night shift production folk went out to celebrate that Thursday, payday. This included two of his supervisors that we got along with. Important for later. Of course, with most of us being in our early 20s, we drank until the bar closed, then split off to keep drinking. 5 of us went to his place, 3 of us being classmates. Number 4 was a fellow tech from my line, number 5 was a production tester from his line. My classmates were getting a hands-on with number 5, so I drove number 4 home somewhere around 5 a.m. That Sunday, I made a comment to classmate number 2 that usually you take them to supper first while I was on that line. It was overheard by a couple of the people that had joined us. The comment was the only one I made, also important for later. Couple weeks go by and I get sent by my line manager to go see HR in the middle of my shift. It was a semi-expected meeting based on what I had heard around there. I spent close to an hour getting grilled and told HR exactly what I saw and said, as well as mentioned his supervisors that were there. Found out 2 things. Folks had been spreading rumors for 2 weeks and she was underage at the bar. Essentially, folks were calling her a very active lady of the evening. HR required me to send an apology email out because they figured out I was the source. Oh boy, did I send an email out. I CC'd the entire effing company, stating what I saw and that I was only apologizing for my original comment that usually you buy them supper first, but not for what had snowballed into, as I hadn't even said it more than once. Also stated that her own supervisors should have known she was underage. Funny enough, HR sent out an email the next day telling people to not spread rumors. She left a week or so later. I was promoted in July 2007, and there was still no mention of that email or event when I was promoted again in 2009, and again in 2010. My exit interview also made no mention of it in 2010. HR never did have another meeting with me, even though I know there were other complaints about me. Almost like they didn't want another company-wide email going out. Alright, before anybody gets their undies in a knot, I want to clarify, OP said that this person was 18 years old and 19 is the drinking age where they are. So they were underage for drinking in the bar, but they were over the age of consent. Just making sure that's clear. Alright, there's a comment chain here I want to get into. The first one comes from a user called Coco Peely. It says, sure, it was malicious compliance to put HR on notice with the company-wide email after what sounds like a weak investigation. But is anyone else feeling bad for the underage, assumed under drinking age person number 5 for being the subject of much discussion and then having their personal life discussed in a company-wide email? Another commenter called Dark and Edgy said, yeah, not gonna lie, OP mentioning that other complaints about him not going anywhere just makes this workplace sound toxic as F. Well, OP responded to these and said, whole pile of nepotism around there with a sprinkling of cronyism. If you weren't good at your job, you better know someone or something. I'm just the guy who tries to be the subject matter expert on my specialty and try to know something about someone. I had folks from my production line asking me for help 3 years after I left production. Had 2 engineering change orders on that product under my name. Company laid off just over 400 employees 6 months after I left. Was just over 1,000 in 6 buildings and 2 provinces when I left. Okay, let's go back on this one a little bit because OP's talking about being the person that started the rumor and being drawn into HR for it. OP, this is true. You actually said that in your story. You're the one who made the comment, so you are the one who started the rumor. I think you are the piece of work in this case. This story comes to us from Warm Kitten. Professor demands we stick to schedule. We stick to schedule. This was last year. In hindsight, I feel a little bad for the professor. He wasn't the worst I'd ever had, and he was up against a university which was in turmoil behind the scenes and spearheading an untested new course. That being said, I am paying quite exorbitantly for this education, and he was a right snot about this. So, hey. It was a history course, and one of the assignments was a group project wherein we presented in front of the class. There was a 3-hour seminar taking place in a lecture hall, the last hour of which was reserved for 2 groups to go up and present at half an hour apiece. This would involve a Q&A session afterwards just to keep us on our toes, I suppose. Professor really emphasized that we pick the week and topic we're going to present in, and that's that. It's first come first serve, and if you miss your spot, you get a 0. Thought nothing of it at the time, seemed fair. Didn't like his attitude, but whatever, right? Well, I won the lottery with the group I was assigned. They were grand lads and a dream to work with. We decided on an advantageous week to present, given our schedules, and we spent the run-up fine-tuning this presentation and really getting it to work. We used a stopwatch and everything. We even brought in outsiders to ask questions we might not predict. All was well. Except we were presenting in week 5 and a disturbing pattern had emerged during the seminars in weeks 2, 3, and 4. For all his talk about keeping things constrained and everyone working within a schedule, whoever went second was screwed. The first group always ran long, and the second group had to make do with, at most, 20 minutes. You could see the stress on their faces. So come week 5, the rest of my group, a little bit more nervous than I am, worries aloud about whether all of our careful planning will be for pot. I decide to throw a Hail Mary, thinking that the worst I could get is a no, right? So I go up right before class starts and ask the professor, what are the odds we might go on first out of the 2? After all, we're sure we have this down to 30 minutes. The dude proceeds to rake me across the coals in front of everyone. It was a normal speaking voice, but the podium was right by the door, and people were filing in. Tells me not to ask such a stupid question, and to go back to my seat. I go back, tail between my legs, pissed off, and sit with steam shooting out of my ears for the next 2 hours. Sure enough, the other group goes first, and sure enough, they run long. We shoot concerned looks to the professor, who is too busy watching the other group to notice. Come 50 minutes in, and the first group is just about wrapping up. The guys in my group are silently freaking out about this. Nightmare, right? That's when the professor stands up, polite applause all around, and then says, Well, I guess we're finishing early today, huh? Like a scene out of a courtroom drama, the four of us stand up like a shot and ask what the heck is going on. He can't quite hear us from back, and we're all talking at once, so he asks what's going on. I charge down those steps like King Kong. In the same tone of voice, in front of the same door that people were now filing out of, I tell this guy that we're booked for the assignment today, and we have something prepared. What? Turns out he totally plumb forgot that we were presenting today, and that's why he was so mad at my suggestion earlier. So I tell him we're presenting now to an empty room, or he's giving us 100. The poor guy sure did try, insisted we hadn't signed up this week, we had, insisted that he could schedule us in next week, even assuming 2 of 4 of our group weren't away on placement for their teaching degree, we booked for this week as ordered. Insisted that he had somewhere to be, not my problem, mate. Dude just had to wear it. After making a phone call to, presumably his next appointment, he had to stand there, white as a sheet, and wear it. I'll never forget the look on his face. So we presented to a lecture hall empty of all but the professor and 2 students who, I guess, wanted to see more of the show. We got a great grade to boot. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Bear Lindsay. It says, I was expecting you to stand up in the middle of the first group for your scheduled start time, but this is so much better. Another commenter down below called Real Ultimate Papo said, drama, conflict, victory, embarrassing defeat. This had it all. Lesson learned for the professor, don't be a snot to the little guy. They may just crush your hopes and dreams. And free time. Can we visit one little thing here that's kinda biting at me? Why didn't this professor have a stopwatch? Why didn't the professor cut off the other team when they got to 30 minutes? Even if they thought there wasn't somebody else presenting that day, they set the timelines, so they should have been cutting them off right at that 30-minute mark. Those were the rules. So what is this professor doing? It sounds like they're either indifferent or incompetent, but I'm not quite sure which one. So I'd like to hear from you guys. If you're on YouTube, please comment down below and let me know what this professor was thinking. This story comes to us from Due Date 2024. College administration says that AI is here to stay. It sure is, and it will reduce cheating. I'm a college professor and teach a first-year core linguistics unit. Cheating has always been a problem, more so with the advent of AI, where some students turn in reference-less ChatGPT word salad. There are tools that can detect AI written text. It's not definite, but if a piece of text is assessed as being likely AI written, coupled with a student being unable to defend themselves in an oral viva, then it's pretty solid evidence. I submitted academic dishonesty reports for several students. I was hoping to spend an hour or so on a call in total with those students and ask them questions about their essays. I got an email back from admin saying that they would not entertain having oral vivas, that AI detectors give false positives, so unless there is an actual AI prompt in their essay, we don't want to hear about it. And that even if they did cheat, it's just a sign of adaptability to modern economic forces. They finally told me that I should therefore learn to incorporate AI into my classes. This happened 12 months ago. Okay, college administration, I will learn to incorporate AI into my classes. I'm the course coordinator for the core unit. I have full control over the syllabus. I started to use an AI proctoring software for all my assessments and quizzes. This software can use facial recognition and tracks keystrokes and copy pasting. I also changed the syllabus to have several shorter writing assignments, 400 words, instead of a couple large ones, 1500 words. Before you dislike me for ruining students' lives, this is a first-year course. Additionally, only citizens can enroll in online degrees in my country, and they only need to start paying back their student loans if they earn more than $52,000 a year. The result? Cheating has been reduced to a nil in my unit. All forms of cheating have been abolished in my class, including paid ghostwriting, AI, and human. I was called to a meeting a few weeks ago where a board told me that data analysis showed that a higher proportion of the new students in my major are discontinuing their degree, and that this was forecast to cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition and CSP funding over the next few years. They told me that they fear my unconventional assessment method might be to blame. I simply stated that I was told to incorporate modern technologies. We are offering an asynchronous online degree. Our pathos is to uphold academic honesty, and that I offer flexible AI-driven asynchronous assessment options that are less demanding than having to write large essays. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Shadow1432. It says, "Though I applaud your out-of-the-box reasoning and syllabus adjustment to curb academic dishonesty, I am concerned regarding the invasive nature of facial recognition software and keystroke loggers, what is essentially malware installed on a student's personal computer. I, for one, don't understand how anybody can completely rely on AI for anything. I've played around with ChatGPT myself quite a bit, and that thing hallucinates all the time. It gives you answers that are just completely incorrect, along with some that are, but you just don't know what's right and what's wrong. As far as the professor in this story implementing AI tools to stop cheating, I can understand some of it, but the ones that they decided to use do seem to be incredibly invasive." This story comes to us from Golflip. "Maintenance engineer upset we fixed something without him? Okay, we won't fix anything anymore." For context, I work at a hotel with one maintenance engineer. Not a large hotel, so one is enough. Any regular day, he insists I call him about maintenance work rather than putting in a work order so he can just fix it and not have to go close out an order on the computer. This leads to me calling 4 to 5 times a day. I call him for things like broken ACs, hanging up a picture frame, cabinet door falling off. If it's something easy like a light bulb or clogged drain, I just fix it myself. Recently, he took 2 weeks off work for a surgery. I tried to figure most things out myself and only called him if I really needed assistance. Instead of 4 to 5 calls a day, I called him maybe 4 times the entire 2 weeks to let him recover and rest. I tried to fix most things myself and figure it out to not bother him. When he comes back from his vacation, he sees something was installed incorrectly, a shower wall shampoo holder. I put it on the wall but did not grout it. He responded by saying, "If you want to do my job, let me know and I'll go elsewhere," and was generally petty for the rest of the day. Okay, I won't do your job for you. Light bulb out? Call. Phone unplugged? Call. Remote out of batteries? Call. Toilet not flushing? Call. Drain clogged? Call. Probably called over 20 times. Do I know how to fix these things? Of course, but I don't want him to leave, so I'll let him do his job. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, 1. It's a 3M sticky strip on the back of a plastic mount. He is upset that I didn't caulk it. No major harm done or tons of work to be undone. 2. We do track maintenance requests to see history and identify recurring problems to catch issues. He just prefers I call him rather than going online to check and close them because he isn't tech savvy. So I'm doing both. OP, do you want to take your malicious compliance even further with this guy? Because he says he wants to be able to do his job and that you shouldn't be doing it. So make sure that he's doing his job absolutely properly. Stop calling him. Start using the forms and the ticketing system. Make him go on the computer, update those tickets, and close them out when they're done. That would be the best malicious compliance ever. This story comes to us from CEO of Rejection 99. Professor, you want a 1-page assignment? I'll give you a 1-page assignment. Don't worry, no hard feelings were caused. Context. For a previous assignment, I had to research a topic, so I made an 11-page document. I admit, it did have a lot of extraneous info though. I didn't want to print it, so I emailed it to my friend to present it on her iPad. When I presented my submission, the professor was confused, so he wanted all of us to redo the assignment, this time only 1 page. So I had an idea. I simply exported a PDF of my original document with all 11 pages on a single sheet, with the feature in Adobe Acrobat where you can print multiple pages on one sheet, that I called my prank file. Don't worry, I also made a legitimate submission that was shortened to 2 pages. The professor was okay with it. I emailed both files to my friend, then instructed her to open my prank submission first, then, right as the professor becomes disappointed in my work, to pull up my actual submission next. Today, I go to class and I eagerly await as I see my friend open the prank file and show it to my professor. We all laughed and he commented on how tiny the text was. Then, she opened my actual submission and I presented that work. He congratulated me on completing the assignment. What a day. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, edit, the professor did not specify the 1-page requirement and other things he wanted us to research until the retake. There are only 2 other students in the class. One was a piece of paper with both sides printed, and the other was a 6-page long PDF file. Professor was okay and happy with them both. Prior to the retake, other students also presented multi-page long documents, one of which were 3 sheets of paper with both sides printed. I submitted a 2-page file because I felt it was impossible to shorten the paper down to 1 page without removing the more important info. Plus, our pages had to include pictures, which took up a lot of page space. I figured that it would be the equivalent of printing both sides of 1 sheet of paper anyway. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user whose name I will not repeat on YouTube. It says, I'm one of those professors. You missed the point. Being succinctly effective is the point. Okay, I feel like I might have missed something on this one, but I'll leave it to you guys to let me know in the YouTube comments. Isn't this just another case of a professor not doing their job properly? They asked for a 1-page assignment, but they didn't ask for it until after the assignment was already completed? What's up with that? And then they allowed them to submit one that was a couple pages long and one that was 6 pages long. So why are you even asking for a 1-page in the first place if you're going to accept ones that aren't 1 page? What is going on here? This story comes to us from George TGWTBN, Dead Compliant. Some months after my mom sold up and downsized, I got a letter from a debt collection agency saying I owed them £134 and some pence, including interest and fees. I had no idea what this was for, so phoned them. It was for the broadband service at my mom's old house, now sold, which had been cancelled a short time before she moved, along with the attached phone line. I explained that there must have been a mistake, as the phone line and broadband were all in one package, and I had cancelled it all together at the same time since the house was sold. The query went back to the supplier. They called me and said they had been unable to cancel the broadband part of the service because the cancellation had not come in from the account holder. But I was the account holder. They said no, the account holder is Mr. My father's name. I explained that there really must have been a mix-up as he had died a few years earlier, and I took over control of the telephone line and broadband account, paying that bill for my mother along with some other regular bills since she no longer had my father's income to cover things. They insisted they had to speak with the account holder and could no longer speak with me on the matter, and refused to speak to me again. Despite all the collection letters and threats of legal action being taken against me, not my deceased dad. They wouldn't take no for an answer, so I drove to his grave, phoned them up and said, account holder is here, you can speak to him if you want. I left the mobile by the gravestone while I wandered around the quiet and pretty churchyard. I heard some irate voices at the end of the line, so I picked up the phone and asked if they'd had any joy speaking with the account holder. An angry voice asked what was going on, so I explained where I was and that I'd love to know if my dad had said anything to them, since I had been unable to reach him under 6 feet of churchyard dirt since we buried him a couple of years earlier. Silence at the end of the phone. I was passed to a manager who apologized profusely and said they'd sort it all out at their end. A month or so later, the debt collection agency sent me a letter saying the matter had been resolved with no balance owing. OP added a really quick edit at the bottom. It says, For any who ask why I didn't just pretend to be my father, my voice is in no way masculine, and I wasn't about to go to the hassle of coaching a male friend or getting a voice machine for something so silly. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Mitch School. It says, I used a bit of Hamlet when debt collectors tried annoying us after my wife's slightly irresponsible father passed, leaving unpaid bills. No, he's not available. Do you know where we can reach him? I hope he's in heaven so prayer may reach him. If not, seek him in the other place yourself. Click. Another commenter called Merely Whelmed One said, when my dad died, we discovered he and mom had done a reverse mortgage, and Wells Fargo had screwed up the paperwork. They left my mom off a singular document, and that allowed them to immediately tell her to leave the property. They sent her a combination condolence letter and eviction notice. I was the executor of his will, so I tried to deal with them. They kept saying they needed to speak to him. It was like they couldn't understand that he was dead. I finally had to hire a lawyer. We had a friend who bought the house and set up a living trust, allowing my mom to stay there until she died or went to a nursing home. 5 years later, she went to the skilled nursing facility, and we helped to sell the house. And we discovered Wells Fargo hadn't correctly filed the paperwork for the sale. Back to square one, they wanted to speak to my dad. I suggested a seance, then called the lawyer again so she could take care of it. Some companies and people are just idiots. Alright, these are great. Taking the phone to the graveyard and then the one where they wanted to do a seance, wonderful. But I remember a story that we read on here a long time ago where they actually took the urn with the parents' remains into the water company or the electric company and placed it down on the counter and said, here you go, you wanted to talk to the account holder, he's in here. This story comes to us from Detected Stupid. Want to ground me? Fine, deal with the consequences. This happened a while ago. At that time, I was currently 13 to 14 years old, I think. I was in a family vacation with my best friend. In this trip, we were supposed to stay 5 days in the lake and then come back home. My mom is, most of the time, a major a-hole, so I was not surprised when she started having a bad attitude with me. After being 3 days on this trip, I was exhausted. I had spent all day on the lake and was really tired. All I wanted to do was to lay down in the camping tent and sleep the day away. My mom decided that this was a great time to ask me for help. She wanted me to carry my brother to the lake, bathe him, and bring him back to her. He was around a year old or so. Obviously, I was so out of myself that I told her no, and that she could do it herself. There was around a 10-minute walk to the lake. She started screaming at me as to how bad of a sister and child I must be, cause I never helped her, and yada yada. Then, after some screaming at me for half an hour, she asked me if now I was ready to help her. I responded no again, and that she hadn't gone out of the van all day, and that she must have been filled with enough energy to do it. Then she goes to scream at my dad to pack things up, take away my phone from me, and that I was grounded till she said so. Also, she made me go alone with her in the car ride. We went with 2 cars cause we didn't fit, and proceeded to lecture me the 2 hours back home about respect, how I should behave, that I should help around more in the house, and to have more family time. And also that I could be doing other things and to get a hobby, because for her, I was apparently all the day on my phone. Cue to the malicious compliance, I decided that if she wanted all that, then I could manage. We arrived home around 11 p.m. and she went to sleep at 3 a.m. for some reason. At 9 a.m. I was up and decided that my new hobby was to play flute at the first thing in the morning. I proceeded to play the flute so bad and loud that my brother started crying. I was playing the flute on the yard and they were in their room all the way across the house and with their windows closed. She couldn't tell me anything because when she came to the yard to tell me off, but I was so polite and gave a perfect reason that I was far and getting a new hobby as she had told me. The house stayed squeaky clean for 2 weeks, but every day I made a point to go to sleep before everyone so that every day I woke up a little bit earlier and ready to blast my flute each day for around 1 hour till they couldn't bear it anymore. I think I even reached playing the flute at 5 a.m. By the end of 2 weeks, the punishment wasn't over, but I was slowly driving my mom insane by messing with her sleep schedule, and I knew that. I also started lecturing my parents because they didn't have proper manners, and they couldn't tell me anything because they knew I was right. I spent all the day stuck to either my mom or dad and talked their ear off, and made everyone watch those horrible educational films no one likes. Made them participate in family bonding time, like making cookies, proceeded to leave as much of a mess as I could, and when they told me to clean it, sorry, but I have already cleaned the house today, could you do it? I was eating their brains, their sanity, and their free time, either by nagging them or by cautiously waking my brother up, but doing it in a quiet way, so that they wouldn't find out, and having them to deal with a baby all day long. The last day, around 2 weeks and a half, my mom was so fed up that she gave me the phone back. It has been around 2 or 3 years since then, and I haven't been grounded since. Alright, let's take a closer look at this one, because at the beginning, OP says they were 13 to 14 years old, and at the end they say it's been around 2 or 3 years since then. So that means that they're only 15 or 16 years old now? And they're still really young, and they don't understand that what they were doing to their parents, and especially doing to their sibling, was a big dick move. Maybe when OP's a bit older and has children of their own, they'll realize that it was a dick move to wake up the sibling that early in the morning, thus inconveniencing the parents, but it might be a while before they have that moment of realization, as it were. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. You're never too young to do malicious compliance. I was cutting bread and remembered this bit of malicious compliance from my youth in Argentina. I have a couple cousins whose grandpa, not mine, on the other side of the family, used to be the town baker when I was like 5 or 6. Picture a small town with the town's bakery kind of place. Bakery includes a chicken coop for eggs, Grandpa Baker's house, a huge oven and prepping area, storage room with piles of flour sacks as high as mountains, a well for the water, a pantry, the office, and the bakery itself. Huge place, probably more than 100 meters long and 50 meters wide. For me and my bigger cousin, about my age, being let loose there is like the ultimate playground. We can climb mountains of flour sacks, we can try to catch chickens, we can run from store to the back, but the biggest thing ever, there are a lot of amazing baked goods to eat. So much so that they have to close the store during Grandma Baker's nap time because we sneak in and rampage. Grandpa Baker works night shifts until like 10 or 11 a.m., so he's out cold until 5 or 6 p.m. every day also. Both my cousin and I had, then, baby brothers, so our mums couldn't be on top of ourselves all day. The rampaging keeps getting out of hand, so Grandma Baker calls cousin and me and says, "Look, while I'm taking a nap, you can't have any baked goods or anything the store sells. Am I clear?" "Yes, Grandma Baker." If you've ever been to Argentina, you probably know what dulce de leche is. To Argentinians, it's probably the most delicious thing ever. Think peanut butter or chocolate spread, but 10 times better. And it's not a baked good, and the store doesn't sell it, but the pantry is full of it because it is used in baked goods. Think croissant with dulce de leche inside. You know where this is going, right? Wooden spoon in hand, the kind you use to stir a stew. Cousin and I sneak into the pantry and probably eat something like half a kilo or more of dulce de leche each. Malicious compliance and a huge stomachache later on never tasted so good. OP commented below the story and said, "This to me is a core memory, as in Inside Out. From it comes my love for baking, malicious compliance, and yes, dulce de leche." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Xaviria. It says, "The first time I made dulce de leche by boiling a can of sweetened condensed milk, I thought I saw God. It has not been the same since. It's only been meh. Too bad." OP responded to this one and said, "Yes, not even close to the real thing." Another commenter down below called Ancient Dependent 59 said, "My mom told us that her mom used to make it when she was a kid in the Depression. Mom got so excited telling us about it that she had to show us right then. She was visiting during Thanksgiving and occupied a whole burner on the stove while chef husband was making Thanksgiving Day dinner. The caramel was delicious, but ever after, husband referred to his mother-in-law as the old can boiler." Ah yes, just leave it to children to find the maliciously compliant way to still have the treats. OP, this was absolutely awesome. This story comes to us from Maleficent Way 8694. Remind me of my work hours. I will remind you of my work hours. A few years ago now, I worked as a nurse in Wales. There was a junior sister there who was an odd woman. She would openly bully a couple of staff members by telling them to do a faster handover by entering the room several times during said handover to tell them to be quicker, until she was told that they would be a lot quicker if they hadn't been made to stop several times during their report. I didn't drive at the time, so had to take the bus. One early shift, the bus was a bit late, which made me 5 minutes late to the start of the shift. I was told by junior sister that I would need to take the 5 minutes off of my 20-minute coffee break or work an additional 5 minutes at the end of my shift. When I started to voice my annoyance at being punished for something out of my control, I was told, "Your working hours are from 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. with one 20-minute break." I chose to deduct the 5 minutes from my already short break, as leaving 5 minutes late would leave me late for my bus home. A few shifts later, I was getting on with my work and had a few care plans to rewrite. At the time, all notes were handwritten. As I had been a bit frosty with junior sister, just keeping any conversation strictly professional, I sat down to start rewriting said care plans. Junior sister asked if I wanted a hand, to which I replied, "If you would like to, thank you," which she picked a bunch up and went into her office. Cue Malicious Compliance. Bang on 3 p.m., I packed up my things, grabbed my coat, and made a point of saying goodbye to junior sister. She looked up from her desk and asked me where I was going, to which I responded home. She said she was still writing my care plans and would I write a couple so she can get them done quicker. Yes, you guessed it. I replied with, "My working hours are from 7:30 till 3. I get no leeway when my bus is late, so I will no longer be staying after my shift is finished. I will just hand over any outstanding jobs to the next shift." To which I walked off. I would like to say the look on her face was priceless, but I had already left the ward and didn't see it. So worth losing 5 minutes to not be able to finish my food on my break. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Traditional Egg 8146. It says, 20-minute lunch break sounds absolutely horrible. Being a nurse is already very stressful, and having to finish my lunch within 20 minutes would feel like hell. OP responded to this one and said, "The break allowance is pretty pants. It was easier to take in a sandwich and make a coffee beforehand, so it was at optimal glug temperature and sit in the unit break room. There was no chance of making it all the way to the canteen and back." OP, I completely agree with what you did walking out when your time was up for the day, because I would do that as well. You don't owe them any extra time, especially if you're paid by the hour. This story comes to us from Dark Fury 1982. You want me to help someone who doesn't want it? Sure, that'll go over well. So this story happened over 20 years ago, back when I was in high school working for my first non-family job. I worked at a restaurant that offered a buffet and pizza, a game room, and drinks. No, not one with pizza in the name either. The location in question no longer exists, so I feel more comfortable telling this story now. At the time, I, 17 male, was working on a Sunday. I was asked to work the bar open shift 9 to 4. Around 12 or 1, the closer would come in. I was able to do everything except pour alcohol and do register for sales related to alcohol. No big deal. Football comes on, Packers versus Cowboys, and soon the closer came in. She, 30s, has some sort of disability given a speech impediment, but I neither knew what it was, asked, or even cared about it. I had put in my 2 weeks notice, as I got sick of the closing shifts I would get, which should be until 10 p.m., but sometimes going past midnight, in violation of my work permit. Closer comes in during a slow period and tells me she's got it handled for now. Great, that leaves me with nothing really to do. So I pick up a tub and start bussing tables, cleaning them for those who may not know. We have 2 managers on duty that day, one I liked, Madge, and one I didn't like so much. Let's call him Rob. Screw you, Rob. Wait, that's my line. Madge sees me bussing and asks what I'm doing, so I let her know what happened. She sees the bar area getting behind with dirty glasses to be cleaned, along with a long line of customers, and asks me to go back to help. I figure I'll do the glasses and let her handle the customers. That way, it's less stress for her. I get there, get going on glasses, and after a few, she sternly tells me she had it under control. I explain that I was asked by the manager to help out over here. She angrily says I'm not needed here. This left me puzzled, but I went back to bussing tables as I couldn't find any manager at the time. A couple minutes later, Madge sees me and sternly asks why I wasn't doing what I was told. I again explained what happened, that she asked me to help, but my help wasn't welcomed. I was trying to keep the peace between us and didn't want to look like I was doing nothing, so I was trying to help get tables turned over quickly, since we went to having a host do seating given how busy it got. I get told again to go back, do glasses like I was, and to get her if anything else happens. So I go back, knots in my stomach, for I knew a storm was brewing. Deep breath taken, I drop my tin off for the dishwashers and go back to the bar. Her line is at least a dozen deep, only 1 register, and no clear counter space for dirty cups to go. So I grab a couple cups, start washing, but next thing I know, a hand grabs my wrist. I turn over, and here it's the closer reprimanding me. Angry at being grabbed like that, I say to her, "Don't you ever grab me like that with that kind of hostility. I was told to be here and to help you by the manager. I do not appreciate you grabbing me like that. And if you ever do that again, I promise you I will consider it an attack on me personally, and I will defend myself appropriately." At the end of that, Manager Rob comes around, grabs her off to the side, leaving me to manage the bar by myself. The patrons there who saw what happened sided with me, saying I handled it about as well as I could have, and that she was out of line. Nice to have that validation, but it mattered not. A few minutes later, I get told to go home. Wait, what? Me? Don't I get a chance to say my side of what happened? No, go home. If I leave, I'll never set foot in this store again. I say, giving one last chance to do the right thing. I don't care, go home. Fine, I went home. Rob didn't witness any of what happened earlier, to my knowledge, and sided with her, and didn't even bother getting my side of the situation. So I left. The rest of the week, I was supposed to be closing the game room 4 to 9. I called the next day after school, got the main manager, explained what happened, and said I cannot in good faith work the rest of my notice given the hostile work environment that has come up. He thanked me for my time and ensured if I ever needed a job in the future that I would have one there. Thankfully, I didn't need to go back, but it was still nice to know. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Lurker2358. It says, "You may like Madge, but this situation is on her. The second time she sent you to the bar, she should have accompanied you to enforce her instructions. It's not on you to defend her orders." Another commenter down below called Contrantier said, "Rob probably knew you were on your way out, so he chose to act like a spineless loser and pretended to take her side. Maybe he was just trying to get some. What a wimp." Okay, first of all, I just want to say I'm very upset with this Rob guy for bringing down our name. Secondly, I can kinda see this one from the closer's point of view because they're in their 30s and the 17-year-old whippersnappers trying to butt in on their area, trying to get work done over there, making it look like they're not doing everything they're supposed to be doing. I probably would have kicked you out of my area as well. However, even with that being said, if my manager came to me and said, "Hey, I want this person to help you out for a little while," I would say, okay, because that's my manager, not just the 17-year-old coming up to me and saying, "Hey, I'm supposed to do this." OP, I do feel like none of this is your fault though. You were young, 17, and honestly, that's probably not the best place for a minor to be working anyway, in a bar with people who are drinking and there's always inappropriate stuff going on, yeah, no, there's plenty of other places that you could work that would be much better for somebody of your age. Okay, before we move on to the next story, I want to ask a question of the audience. This is more so pointed towards the people who are on YouTube because they can comment down below. But I got a comment on one of my videos a couple days ago that said I was being overly critical of the OPs in these stories recently. So I would like you guys all to comment down below on YouTube and let me know your thoughts on this one. Am I overly critical of the OPs these days? Have my opinions really changed from the time I started doing this to now 5.5 years later? I'd really like to know what you all think. So on YouTube, comment down below and I'll try to respond to as many as I can. This story comes to us from Unlikely Ad 2116. We applied for every position we were qualified for. This story is called The Unpromotables. Important backstory. In the USA, government jobs are under the civil service system. This is supposed to ensure that government jobs are given out based on what you know, not who you know. For example, to get a job as an entry-level accountant, one would need to meet the minimum qualification of a Bachelor of Science in Accounting. Periodically, a test would be given for that position. The people who score highest on the test are first in line for jobs. This uses the rule of 3. The job is supposed to go to one of the 3 highest scoring candidates who agree to accept the job if offered. Promotion examinations are held the same way. Needless to say, managers and politicians hate this. There was a group of employees at my state agency who took every promotion exam we were qualified for, and generally got top scores on all of them. We all had excellent work records and even awards for productivity, innovation, and going the extra mile. None of us had any black marks in our personal files other than maybe a counseling memo. That is basically a slap on the wrist, less formal than a write-up. Boss told employee not to do X ever again. However, we had problems like use of offensive language. We said inappropriate things like, "Why are we doing this way? This is awkward and inefficient. We can streamline this process." Bosses don't like this kind of language. We also brought offensive materials into the workplace, such as, "Look at this. It says right here in Chapter X, Section Y of Z state law that we're doing this wrong." Bosses don't like this either. So now we have a group of highly qualified, motivated employees sitting on top of the promotion list. The people the bosses wanted to promote were lower on the list. But if 3 of us applied, were interviewed, and said yes, then the job legally had to be given to one of us. We got to know each other because the lists were available to employees. We started with calling each other. "Did you apply for X promotion?" We sort of became a support group. We'd even meet for lunch or drinks after work sometimes, and called ourselves the Unpromotables. Then we realized something. Why are we only applying for the jobs we want? This is where the Malicious Compliance comes in. The bunch of us started applying for every promotion we were on the list for. No matter how bad the job, how mean the boss, how toxic the office, no matter what the duties, we all applied. And when asked if we'd accept the job if offered, we all said yes. We heard through the grapevine that this was driving management insane. Their teachers' pets and brown nosers wanted promotions, but we were blocking them. Whenever management tried something shady, they quickly found out that all of us knew our rights under state civil service law backwards and forwards. It was both funny and frustrating to see management leave a position unfilled rather than give it to any of us. This was also not popular with the employees in those offices, who now had to pick up the slack from the vacant position, which was above their pay grade, as well as their own, with no increase in pay. I was actually offered a promotion once, and the hiring manager had started onboarding me, but the big boss over both offices shot it down because they didn't want to lose me from my old position. That boss blocked my promotions for over a decade. Sorry this doesn't have a happy ending. That was still the status quo when I took early retirement the second I turned 55. Was planning on working longer, but 30 plus years of a steady diet of toxic crap was drastically affecting my physical and mental health. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Sparkicidal. It says, "I'm just impressed that you put up with someone blocking your promotions for a decade. I would have left way before that." I don't think this commenter has any understanding of government jobs and the benefits that go along with them, Because yes, they stayed where their promotions were being blocked for a decade, but when they retire from the position that they're in, the retirement benefits are that good. It's a government job. You're not going to leave it and go somewhere else that isn't a government job and doesn't guarantee your retirement benefits. Now, I could go into another point on this one where OP and the other people were blocking jobs from other people who actually deserve to get them, but I don't want to be seen as shitting on OP again, so I'm going to stop here. OP, congrats on your early retirement. I hope you're enjoying every minute of it. Our next story comes to us from Not Your Nanny. I have great respect for accountants, but any competent accountant has at least a touch of OCD. It's really necessary for them to do their job properly, but some have more of it than most. At one time, we had a controller who really put the obsessive in obsessive compulsive, and she decided that we were a little too fast and loose with the company credit card, which we were at that point. So she created a payment request form and wrote a policy to go with it. The form wasn't unreasonable. In fact, we still use it today. The policy was another story. The form was to be used, per the policy, for all uses of the company credit card, which we used for everything because the owner got airline mileage on it. It had a 6-figure limit, and it wasn't unusual for us to have to make a mid-month payment to keep from going over. He got a lot of miles, all uses, no matter how small. The policy? Each form had to be signed by either the owner or 2 higher-ups, one of whom was frequently not in the office. I'm the IT guy, and we're a retail store chain, and a pretty successful one, so there are a lot of IT issues that are extremely time-sensitive. Gotta keep the cash registers running full speed, but can be fixed with very cheap parts. And I was having to get signatures to order $25 parts off of the internet, every time, with one of the signatures being from someone who was in the office less often than the owner. So it was pretty obvious to me that the correct solution was to have the owner sign it all by himself. He always understood. All I had to do was tell him a cash register was down, and he got it. I do like working for smart people. Until the day I took the third form into his office within an hour or so from his signature because one of the other 2 people who could sign was out of town. He told me he'd look into this as he signed it, and as I walked by the controller's office on the way back to mine, he was already there, having a very polite, they were both professionals, conversation. And from that day forward, the executive VP, who'd been around from the beginning and was trusted as much as the owner's own family, could sign my form all by himself. And I now have signature authority up to $500, as well as my own company credit card, with a much smaller limit. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Hi Sorcerer Greg. It says, damn, that company sounds like a pretty nice place to work. Even the person messing things up was trying to do good things, laugh out loud. OP responded and said, at this point, I've been here over 30 years and have no plans to retire from anywhere else. It's rare to work at a job for someone who actually gives a darn about their employees, but once you find one, you want to keep it. I feel like this story is a case of management making policies for people that they don't directly manage again. We've seen this many times on the channel. Management really needs to know what's going on at the lower levels before they can make changes so significant like this one. This story comes to us from Mustard Unavailable. Tell you in front of your other customers and employees why I don't want you as a provider? Sure. This happened around 2012 and deals with my internet provider. They sucked majorly. Days with no internet and no warnings. The last straw was when there was no internet for over 2 weeks. Called them and they said they'll send someone to come look, but nope, no one came. Went to their branch office and one of the higher-ups finally put on his big boy undies and did some work. As an apology, they told me they'll only charge me the days I did have internet. It took 3 more days for me to have internet again. Then the bill came and it was higher than what I should be paying for. Went to the branch office the same day I got the bill. Before I could say my grievance, the employee told me I'd have to pay a penalty since I'll be late in paying, and that just made me blow my gasket. They wouldn't explain crap to me, so I told them I want them gone. I didn't want them as a provider anymore. I was there at 9 a.m. and done at 2 p.m. They really tried to get me to stay, but when they realized I was set in my decision, they finally complied. One of the things I had to do was call one of their reps or whoever to tell them my reasons for dropping them. The phones were by the entrance and waiting room. Went there and some assistant was watching me like I committed a horrible crime. Called them and that took me close to 10 minutes. When someone finally answered, they asked me my list of problems with them, not sure what for, they didn't really give a crap about them before. So proceeded to tell each and every F-up they did and the last straw. It was in front of waiting customers and those coming in. The assistant looked embarrassed and ready to murder me. It got way worse as several customers walked out after hearing me. When it was all over, even one of the managers was trying to guilt trip me for talking crap about them. Had to pay the bill and the penalty, but by then, they wanted me out quick. I got a better internet provider. I also had last laugh when I lambasted them on Facebook. A lot of comments really laying on how awful they were. This story reminded me of a phone call that I made a few months ago after fiber had been installed in our neighborhood. I called up the cable provider we had previously for our internet and let them know that I was going to switch to the new provider unless they could give me similar service for a better price. To which they exclaimed, absolutely not. They didn't have anything better and they couldn't match the price. So they got very quickly ditched in favor of the fiber line. I'm now enjoying a very nice symmetrical 3GB service that's 3GB down and 3GB up, and these videos make it up to YouTube and the podcast very quickly. So Kojiko, you're missing out because I tell all my neighbors about my better service now, and I can guarantee you that a bunch of them have switched over. This story comes to us from Simo289. Do nothing? Okay. A couple of years ago, I worked customer support for an investment and pensions department of a larger company. Basically, answered the phone and helped customers who don't understand something about their account or need to access features usually reserved for their accountant. I had only been with the company about 3 months, had finished my training, and recently been cleared to take calls unmonitored. But a supervisor was still listening back to 3 or 4 of my calls each day just to check. It was coming to the end of the tax year, so the lines were super busy, open to close, but a lot of the calls I was taking were for pensions or ISA withdrawals or deposits. So all I had to do was check a few details, then drop the customer in the call queue for the relevant department. Due to the high volume and relative simplicity of these calls, I was answering 20 to 30 a day. After a week or so, I got a message from my team leader telling me I was taking too many calls. So the number he was checking wasn't a high enough percentage to be indicative of my performance. Okay, fine. Starting the next day, I would take a call, pass the customer on, then sit and twiddle my thumbs for around an hour, all while the queue is getting longer and longer. We're talking 2 to 3 hours on hold. Then take another call and repeat. Fast forward another couple of weeks and I have a performance review with my team leader. He says that my verification of customer identities isn't up to scratch with company standards. I explained that 1, I am meeting the standards that were laid out in our training, and that all further advice and guidance had been completely contradictory or so vague as to be meaningless. He tells me that when I come in tomorrow, I need to log in, mark myself as in training so I won't receive any calls, and wait to hear from him about next steps. So the next morning I log into my work laptop and wait to hear from him. For 5 days, I sat in my spare bedroom and office playing video games, all while logged in, marked as in training, and waiting till I hear from my team leader. The next week, I get a message from a manager 2 or 3 steps above my team leader, asking why I haven't taken a single call in 5 days. I explained what my team leader told me, sent screenshots of emails, etc., and said that I was waiting to hear back. She said she would look into the situation and get back to me. Cue another week of video games and naps on company time. I ended up getting made redundant and taking the balance of my annual leave before anything got resolved because the company outsourced 90% of the call handling to India. But those 2 weeks were great. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Original Charity 817. It says, I guess they realized they could not pay you for your time, and the customers were used to the wait. OP responded and said, I guess so. Funny though, because this company had made a whole thing of advertising that all their call centers were in the UK. Guess they had to drop that part from their ads. You know, honestly, if a large company isn't paying attention to you and they want to pay you to do absolutely nothing, then I see no reason why you wouldn't just sit back and collect that paycheck. Now, in this story, it was only about 2 weeks that OP got paid before they left, but if you check out another story we covered previously, Forgotten Employee, The American Dream, that employee was there for ages, getting paid to do nothing. And it's an epic story, so I highly recommend you check that one out if you haven't already. Linked in the description both on YouTube and the podcast. This story comes to us from Morvon Jellybean. Follow policy? Okay. A few years back, I worked in a corporate office where things ran pretty smoothly, until our new boss, Mr. Micromanage, arrived. Mr. Micromanage was obsessed with one thing: following company policies. He didn't care if policies were outdated, inefficient, or outright absurd. If the rule existed, you had to follow it perfectly, and he loved catching people not complying. One Monday morning, he called a meeting to lecture us on policy adherence. He ended his speech with, "If it's in the manual, you follow it, no exceptions." I'm not a fan of being micromanaged, but hey, rules are rules, right? I knew that our company's policy manual hadn't been updated in years, and some policies were questionable. So I decided to have a little fun. One of the most outdated rules was about how to handle printed documents. According to this gem, any printed company document, no matter how minor, needed to be reviewed and stamped by our document compliance officer before being distributed. Oh, and guess what? That position had been eliminated in a round of budget cuts 2 years ago. But hey, Mr. Micromanager said no exceptions. The next day, I printed out a standard quarterly report that everyone in the office needed. When people asked for it, I told them, sorry, I can't distribute it until it's been reviewed and stamped. I sent an email to Mr. Micromanager asking where I could find the non-existent document compliance officer. He came storming over to my desk confused. Just send out the report. I'd love to, but as per company policy, it needs to be reviewed and stamped first. Where should I send it? Mr. Micromanager pauses and glares. Just follow the policy. I nodded enthusiastically and let it be. Word spread quickly, and soon everyone in the office was complying with every arcane policy in the manual. Karen from HR, she started enforcing the dress code policy that required all employees to wear business formal attire at all times. Suddenly, everyone was showing up in suits and ties, and people in accounting were running spreadsheets in cocktail dresses. Jake from marketing, he made sure to send a request to Mr. Micromanager every time he needed to make a 10-cent photocopy, as per the ancient policy that all expenditures, no matter how minor, must be approved by management. By the end of the week, the entire office was a disaster. People were wasting time and resources, projects were delayed, and everyone was cranky from wearing stiff, formal clothes. Mr. Micromanager tried to reprimand us, but we just kept saying, sorry sir, just following the policies like you said. It only took 1 week of chaos for Mr. Micromanager to call another meeting, where he begrudgingly told us to use common sense instead of following every single policy. He even promised to update the manual. And that, my friends, is how our office turned into a temporary circus of hilarious compliance until our boss finally learned that some rules are meant to be bent. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called TrippyNet. It says, it's amazing how quickly a decision can be reversed once the stupidity of it becomes evident. Nicely played. Another commenter down below called SlackerButtFTW said, nope, every time I've been told to just use common sense instead of following standard operating procedures, No matter how outdated, it has bit me in the butt eventually. If they want me to stop following policy, they need to change the policy. I had a boss jumping my butt about violating a new policy that he had been on the committee that wrote it. I pulled out the policy and showed him I was following it to the letter and got the "that's not what I meant when I wrote it." I've got to 100% agree with this last commenter. If you want me to go against current policy, then you need to change the current policy. Or at least give me in writing what I'm supposed to be doing that contradicts the current policy, just so that there's some sort of backup when somebody else comes at me and says I'm not doing it the right way and they want to get rid of my job. This story comes to us from I Saw the Sign. Can't fit my bicycle in the luggage hold? A few months ago, I booked a return ticket to a nearby town over a busy holiday weekend. I wanted to do a little cycling over the weekend, so I phoned the bus company before the day of departure to check if I could take a bicycle with me. They confirmed that I could, so long as I arrived at the bus station half an hour early. On the trip down, they loaded my bicycle into the baggage hold, even opening up a special side hatch to make it easier to get it in. So I enjoyed a few bike rides while I was down there. Come the day of my return and it's belting rain. I get to the bus station half an hour early, but sopping wet. Considerate as I am, I purchased some paper towels to wipe down my bike so it won't dampen anyone else's luggage. Then the bus arrives. I go straight over to the baggage loading area and ask the guy if I can put my bike in. He replies, "No." Do I need to wait? No, he's just not going to let my bike on at all. So I spend a quarter of an hour arguing with the guy as the clock ticks towards departure time. I tell him the bus company has already confirmed I could bring my bike, but that does not move him. He keeps telling me there's no space in the hold, even though I can see there's space in the hold. Now, this is a Sunday and I have work the next day, and it's the end of a holiday weekend, so I might not be able to get a seat on another bus, even if they refund me my money, and nobody's talking about a refund. Finally, departure time has arrived. I yell out, "Well, head office said I could take it on the bus, so I'm taking it on the bus." And I hoist my bicycle in the air and step up into the passenger section of the bus and start making my way to my seat. Now, my seat was booked for the upper deck, so I also have to hoist my bike up the narrow spiral staircase to the upper deck, which I do. My bicycle is XL size, so all things considered, I'm astonished how limited and shallow the scratches were that I left on the plastic finishes of the spiral staircase as I went up. Amazingly, no one made any move to stop me, and the passengers on the upper deck all came onto my side, helping me to secure the bicycle and making no complaint about having to squeeze past it, even though it almost entirely blocked the corridor. Every now and then, the conductor would come up to check our tickets, see the bicycle blocking the way, and turn away defeated. Every time he did so, I made sure to say loudly to my fellow passengers, "I don't know, to me, it would have made more sense to put it in the hold, but it's their bus, they make the rules," and the other passengers would agree with me. The bike and I got home safely. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called something that I have absolutely no chance of pronouncing. It says, "Times have changed. Around here now, all the buses have horns on the front for sticking bikes on. They encourage people to bike and ride." OP responded to this one and said, "Your country is on the right track. I'll have to wait for that glorious day to arrive over here. We have hundreds of kilometers of cycle lanes across the country now, but transporting your bicycle to these destinations can be tricky, as my story shows." Okay, what's interesting to me about this one is that OP was able to leave their bicycle in the aisle of the upper deck of the bus. Hello? Fire code, anyone? If there's an emergency on that bus and people need to get off it quickly, you can't have something like that blocking an aisle. I'm actually really surprised that the bus driver didn't make more of a stink about the bike blocking the aisle than they did about putting it into the storage under the bus. Something seems off here. This story comes to us from Happy Scattered Reader. You want the man of the house? Fine. This is one going back a few years, but it's one that made me chuckle when I remember it. As we live in a busy estate, we are in a prime position for door-to-door callers. Usually they were fine, polite, and if I was happy to listen to their pitch, then great. And if not, they were pretty good about hearing no and leaving me be. In our house, all the utility bills are in my name because I am the financial person in the household, and by mutual agreement, the one who knows how many beans make 5 when it comes to deals and offers. Therefore, I decide our provider each year and negotiate the best offers. I know the exact date we come out of contract and am generally organized in swapping suppliers. Sometimes I do this with the door-to-door salesperson and other times online or via phone. It just so happened one year that we had a door-to-door salesperson knock in for a utility that was pretty close to its contract end date. He immediately started his pitch with, "Good afternoon, is the man of the house here?" Now, straight away, that rubbed me up the wrong way. I answered no, and he proceeded to ask me when he would be home. I mentioned that he was at work, but he was welcome to call back after 5 p.m. when the man of the house would be home. The salesperson wrote this down in his book, nodded at me, and left. Sure enough, he called back after 5 p.m. and spoke to the very irritated man of the house, who asked the salesperson why he didn't speak to me about all this. The salesperson backpedaled so quickly and asked if I was there. Sadly, I was out and wouldn't be back until late, but he was welcome to call over again tomorrow and see if I would speak to him. As it so happens, I did speak to him the next morning. With a beaming smile and a smug of tea in my hand, I thanked him for reminding me to check my offers and had switched online to his company a couple of hours before he arrived. Then I waved him a cheery goodbye. I believe that would have cost him 2 sales as I switched gas and electricity. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called MK Mead. It says, "My wife points this out to me a lot. We live in a rural part of the southern US. She has a decent sized hobby farm and sometimes needs to purchase hay or feed from other farms. The number of farmers that walk past her to ask me what I need is astounding. Even crazier since she's the one that talked to them on the phone or text. I just tell them to talk to her. She's the farmer. I just carry the heavy stuff." Another commenter down below called Pixel Tash said, many years ago, I would get cold callers on the landline. They would ask for the man of the house. So I would hand the phone to my toddler son to babble at them. If you need a Willy to talk to them, there you go. He has the equipment. Alright, in this day and age, and especially with people working for a huge company, are there not policies in place that get rid of statements like, "Can I speak to the man of the house?" I mean, come on. That is so outdated it's not even funny. Although it does make me remember something my dad used to say when I was much younger. It was along the lines of, "Would you like to talk to the man in charge or the woman who knows what's going on?" If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.